Hi, my name is Heather Kempf, and this is my informative speech, and this is my audience. Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Kempf, and I want to talk to you today a little bit about Spanish influenza of 1918. To start, I have a question for all of you. Have any of you come into contact with anybody today that has coughed or sneezed? By show of hands. Okay, all of you. So that means that if you raised your hand, that you are potentially at risk for contracting the influenza virus. First, let me tell you about my background in healthcare. I've been in healthcare for the last 15 years, 12 of which I've been a CNA. As a CNA, the Wisconsin State Board mandates that we have 12 hours in service annually. These topics include items such as infection control and bloodborne pathogens. That means in my last 12 years, I have 144 hours in service. Now let's get back to why we're really here today. Let's talk about Spanish influenza of 1918. Spanish influenza was a highly contagious and infectious disease that showed symptoms such as coughing and sneezing, which led to the claiming of lives of between 20 and 50 million people worldwide. Next, let's discuss the difference between infectious versus contagious. Knowing the difference between these two will help you understand the spread of the Spanish influenza in 1918. By show of hands, how many of you think that the disease was highly contagious? Okay, about a third of you. How many of you think it was highly infectious? Okay, the other 2/3 of you. All of you are actually right. It was both a highly contagious and infectious disease. According to Google.com, infectious is defined as the disease has the potential or may spread. Contagious by the same website is defined as it will spread, it is spread by direct or indirect contact. Now let me explain the difference between direct and indirect contact. According to the article, The Spanish Influenza of 1918 in St. Louis, Missouri, the source of the infection was by secretions of the nose, throat, and lungs. It also states that it was airborne, which under crowded conditions in close living quarters, the virus spread very easily. It could also live on surfaces for hours without a host. They ended up with hospitals that looked a little something like this. Highly crowded, with a highly contagious and infectious disease. Next, signs and symptoms, as I stated earlier, of influenza are expelled into the airway by mucus secretion. According to the article, the 1918 Spanish influenza in Spain, between 20 and 50 million people worldwide were claimed by this deadly disease. Symptoms included fever, chills, sweats, muscle aches, headache, cough, nasal congestion, according to MayoClinic.com. Okay, I have another question for all of you. Does anybody here know what the CDC stands for? Okay, if you said Center for Disease Control, you were right. In another article I read on Livestrong.com, citing the CDC as its source, said that although similar symptoms are shared universally through all influenza viruses, they were particularly severe with the Spanish influenza of 1918. According to a 2006 study done on autopsy samples obtained by Spanish influenza patients, this virus demonstrated extraordinary damage to the lungs with acute inflammation of the airways and soft tissues of the lungs. These changes were associated with massive swelling internally, bleeding, and near complete destruction on a cellular level of the lungs. This would have led to impaired oxygen throughout the body and ideal breeding grounds for bacteria such as pneumonia, which was often a secondary cause of death. Now that you have a more complete understanding of the Spanish influenza and how it spread with its signs and symptoms, let's talk about some specific details. As I stated earlier, in the article titled The 1918 Spanish Influenza in Spain, The total number of deaths were estimated between 20 and 50 million. Other articles that I did research on suggested numbers upwards of 100 million. The true number of deaths may never be known. In the article, Are We Prepared for the Next Pandemic Flu Virus?, we know that today's influenza virus claims 35,000 Americans every single year. The final thing that I want to share to you from that same article surprised me the most. Even if you get your influenza vaccine every single year habitually, it only protects you from about 3 strains of the virus out of a possible 100 or even thousands of different types of strains. That means you only have a 10% chance of actually being protected from being infected. Okay, so is everybody still with me? Do you feel like you're on a little bit of information overload? Let me conclude my time with you today by summing up my main points. So the next time you're out in public and you're coughing or sneezing, we're really hoping that you cover it up and wash your hands. Spanish influenza was a highly contagious and infectious disease that included symptoms such as coughing and sneezing that claimed the lives of an estimated 20 to 50 million people worldwide in the years of 1918 and 19.